Hey guys, number one Marmaduke fan here. I had a really good week. I'm ahead of schedule on working on page 32, feeling good about my weekly page schedule, cleaning my room, slaying the dragon, all that great stuff. So I remembered this tweet from, I feel like it was a month ago at least, and I keep thinking about it, which usually means that if I keep thinking about it, there's a video topic hidden in here somewhere. So I haven't scripted this out. I'm just going to read it and give you kind of my response on it as a work of writing. So let me give you context. About a month ago, Chuck Wendig, who has written Star Wars comics and Star Wars tie-in novels, got into the news because he sued or threatened archive.org because archive.org was distributing digital books like a digital library. And he compared this to piracy. And basically, on the basis of this threat, archive.org paused or stopped doing a sort of digital library book program. Now, there are many ironies to this, like Chuck Wendig is kind of notoriously like an anti-Trump guy on Twitter, dunking on all the stupid Republicans he hates. He will complain about J.R.R. Tolkien being an awful writer, just a bunch of boring world building, and just kind of an obnoxious character. And at first I laughed about this because what I realized when I heard the news is that will basically be Chuck Wendig's legacy. The most notable thing he'll be known for is stopping poor people from around the world from checking out digital books because he, a socialist anti-capitalist, wanted to squeeze every last little penny he could out of his Star Wars books. And then someone shared this segment from one of his books, and every time I read it, it just keeps hitting me in the stomach repeatedly. And just when I think I can't take it anymore, it hits me again and again. So, to be fair to Chuck Wendig, it's probably not fair to just take one page out of the book. Like, maybe this is better if you read it in context of the whole book. But I don't want to be fair to Chuck Wendig because A, he's an asshole, and B, he single-handedly shut down a massive... Archive.org is my favorite website on the earth. Like, archive.org is one of those websites where I consider that like a crowning triumph of the human spirit and human imagination, and Chuck Wendig had to shut it down because you can't have people reading my Star Wars books. Jared Tolkien didn't know anything about writing. And so then I don't bother reading his books because of junk like that. So we're going to try to read this because it's very obvious why this went viral once people started sharing it. And I'm going to try to I'm going to give you like a couple neat nuggets for how to read and how to maybe look at your writing from a different perspective. I'm not a published writer, but because I read a lot, it's given me kind of like cool little things I've picked up that different writers do that you could use. So it starts off, and now, here comes the second TIE fighter. It starts firing at the rooftop, likely intent on bringing the whole building down. It's not a bomber, so it won't happen with one run, but those weapons at the front are no small pop guns either. A couple of passes in the top half of the comm station will be turned to flaming chunks of rubble. Oh. Alright, so we are starting right in the middle of something. It's basically like two TIE fighters are doing strafing runs on whoever the hero is, and this should be a very exciting scene. So, I think a mark of a good writer is, obviously you want to start at the beginning of the story and read the whole story, but for a really good writer, they have a visual idea and they are using the non-visual prose to carry you beautifully from one visual idea to the next. And it's not, in a really good writer, it's not just visual ideas. There's also, in really good writers, there are thoughts and content that's not just a visual picture on a TV screen. So I think problem number one for Chuck is he writes like it's a TV picture in front of him, and he doesn't show much experience about how to convey that. So one problem is, who is the narrator? And my trick for this is, if you hear a thought, try to put the word Batman after it. And if it makes sense, that if you can hear Robin saying, "Holy cow, Batman, here comes the TIE fighter, Batman," then that's a narrator statement. Now, if it's something factual and objective, like the TIE fighter has black wings, Well, that doesn't make sense. The TIE fighter has black wings, Batman. Nope, that's not the narrator. But if it's something like, that TIE fighter is terrifying, Batman, that's a narrator statement. It's the narrator giving an opinion. And this works in journalism, too. If you're reading a fake news piece and it says something like, Republicans pounce on the opportunity to defeat the Democrats, Batman, there you go. If you can hear Robin saying it, and just like poking his head out of nowhere and saying it, that's a narrator giving an opinion that doesn't have anything to do with the description. Now, the thing is, part of the fun of the narrator is the narrator can have an opinion. So in the J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, the narrator is J.R.R. Tolkien reading the story to his son Christopher Tolkien, and sometimes he'll take a break and he'll comment to Christopher Tolkien and ask you, the reader, some questions about what you're reading. Right, so it's a very delightful father-son relationship. Is what the narrator does in The Hobbit. In Lord of the Rings, he grows up the narrator a little bit. He'll still converse with you occasionally about the significance of what's going on, but he's not trying to like make light of it or ease the tension for you. It's sort of like he knows his son has grown up and now he's talking to you a little bit more seriously and a little bit more like a historian. Let's use another book. So in Harry Potter, the narrator only follows Harry Potter unless Harry Potter's having some vision of something else. But you usually only see the story from the perspective of Harry Potter, and you hear the internal thoughts of Harry Potter, but you don't hear other people's internal thoughts. So it's basically, the narrator is basically Harry Potter, but the narrator doesn't say, I am Harry Potter. It just so happens that the narrator knows the thoughts of Harry Potter. For Brian Jakes, Brian Jakes' Redwall books use an omniscient narrator, and the narrator is clearly Brian Jakes reading a rousing good bedtime story to his kids. And so Brian Jakes knows the inner thoughts of all of his characters. And he'll tell you the inner thoughts of the bad guys and all of the evil, devious tricks they're coming up with in their heads. And then he'll switch over and he'll tell you the inner thoughts of the good guys and the fear they have for Redwall Abbey, right? So you have lots of different options for you, for the narrator. I think Chuck Wendig's problem number one is, who the heck is the narrator and why are they thinking this? And so when you say, holy hand grenades, Batman, here comes the TIE fighter, the reason I do that is it sounds like the narrator's just popping the head in and then popping it out again and sort of interrupting the flow of the story. So let me show you how the trick works. And now, here comes the second TIE fighter, Batman. It starts firing at the rooftop, likely intent on bringing the whole building down. It's not a bomber, so it won't happen with one run, Batman. Those weapons at the front are no small pop guns either, Batman. Right, someone is clearly giving you these opinions, but who is it? A couple of passes at the top half of the comm station, and the comm station will be turned to flaming chunks of rubble. So maybe another problem of this is lack of felicity, lack of speed. Even though it's pretty simple language, there's extra verbiage. And now here comes the second TIE fighter. It starts firing at the rooftop. That's kind of passive. Here comes, don't even say here comes. The TIE fighter streaked in like a burst of lightning, blazing fire down on the rooftop, right? This is an intense moment. Things are exploding above their heads. That was some purple prose I just said there, but there's some colorful words you can say, which say, I am scared of the things blowing up over my head. And the narrator who's scared would probably be closely connected to the main character who's scared. A couple of passes at the top half of the comm station will be turned to flaming chunks of rubble. He grabs both sides of Bones' head. Who's he? Now, again, we're just looking at one page, so he's obviously whoever the protagonist is. You got this? Bones says, in that voice that warbles from deep to shrill, a mechanized distortion. Consider it done, Master Temmin. And it's Boomer all caps. And Boomer all caps reads as screaming, Consider it done, Master Temmin. But that's not what the description is saying it should be. And you're supposed to say what the voice sounds like early on. This is an annoying thing where if you introduce a character and then 2 chapters later you say they have blonde hair, well, by then I've already got my mental picture of the character. And if I haven't been imagining them as with blonde hair, too bad. They're going to be the way I've been imagining them for the rest of the book. You're supposed to say this stuff really early on when we first meet the character. A voice that warbles from deep to shrill, a mechanized distortion. What's weird about this is the line "a mechanized distortion." That's sort of like very interesting, Batman, of how this robot has this voice that's warbling from deep to shrill. No, they're being attacked. You don't observe little details like that while you're being attacked. How about Bones says in a voice that even for a droid trembles with fear, "Consider it done, Master Temin." The TIE cannons begin shattering the other half of the roof. Debris sprays. Well, the debris doesn't choose to spray. The debris gets sprayed by the fire. All right, so here's another thing where you can use staccato rhythm in certain situations to try to say that something bad is going on and they're thinking immediately. A really, really good example of this I found recently actually was Spider-Man Kraven's Last Hunt, where he has two thought bubbles going on simultaneously. And one is his rational thought, thinking about how he's going to beat Kraven. And then there's this red box that says rifle, rifle, rifle. And it's because at the back of his mind, Spider-Man's realizing that Kraven has a gun and he doesn't know what to do, right? So you can use brief, tiny little sentences to say that. But if you do too many in a row, if you do run-on sentence, people get bored, and you don't think that way in the middle of a life or death situation. And if you do debris sprays, fire plumes, do, then that's like see Jane run, hey little baby, two-word sentences, right? So I don't think there's a very good rhythm. The TIE cannons begin shattering the other half of the roof. Debris sprays, fire plumes. The sound of the fighter and its guns and the explosions roars in Temin's ears. Okay, another thing that's annoying me is the present tense. So, comedians use present tense a lot. So one time I'm going into the bar, and this guy comes up and he says, "Hey, where's my cannoli?" Right? But the thing is, present tense, it almost kind of suggests a short form or kind of like a blue collar way of talking. And it almost never works for novels. I think some people use it for novels because they think it makes it feel more immediate. But all it really does in a novel format is it takes you out. And it makes this awkward thing of, well, did this happen long, long ago? Or is it happening right now in the present? And literally, the start of every Star Wars movie is a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's an ancient world. So much more natural would be past tense, and it's also past tense is also better for long format stories where it's not some guy saying, "Hey, I'm walking home and this guy gets in my grill and he's driving me nuts." Right? Obviously, that's use of present tense to describe past events, but I don't know. It's almost like I hear a low class blue collar guy when I hear a present tense narrator. The sound of the fighter and its guns and the explosions roars. Wait, the sound roars. And its guns, and the explosion. So I think this is okay because the sound roars in Temin's ears, but it still sounds awkward to its ears, to your ear, because it's the explosions roars, and you want it to say the explosions roar, even though roars is referring back to sound. So one thing you can do is, even if something is grammatically correct but it sounds wrong, you can reorient it. The explosions ring in Temin's ears. All around him, there was nothing but the echoing, something like that, some descriptive language. Not just his ears, he can feel it in the back of his teeth. Sinjir winces, clearly feeling it too. What? Popping up to fire up. Popping up. That's really dramatic and heroic. Let's pop up there to fire off a few futile shots at the incoming fighter, and then turning to pop shots at the stormtroopers now coming up through the escape shaft. Popping up. We're repeating this weak word over and over again. Where's this escape shaft? How does Sinjir know the stormtroopers are coming through? Where is everything? Bones shrieks, "Roger, Roger!" Then the battle droid jumps up in the air, tucking arms and legs together, forming a cannonball. Hyphen to indicate a pause. And crashing through the TIE fighter's front windshield. What? They have windshields. So another awkward thing about this is an exciting moment, right? So the idea is the droid it's kind of a goofy mental picture of it tucking itself into a cannonball and going through a window, and then it pauses and then picks up and crashing through the TIE fighter's front windshield. So when you have a pause like this, that's a pregnant pause. And if you have lots of pregnant pauses, it doesn't work because you're just pregnant. You want a pregnant pause right for a dramatic moment. Okay, so this is a pretty dramatic moment, crashing through the windshield, but it just sounds like one sentence with a long, unnecessary pause in it. So maybe something better would be Bone shrieks, "Roger, Roger," knowing what he has to do. Curling himself into a ball, he leaps straight up into the air. Pause. Straight into the TIE fighter's windshield. I don't even like the word windshield because that evokes the idea of a car. But it's long, windy wording for a big, immediate woomph word picture. Now here's the part that everybody talks about because it's viral. The TIE wibbles and wobbles in the air, careening drunkenly across the Mirian rooftops. It zigzags herkily-jerkily out of sight. This doesn't even make sense as a word the word picture I have is of this TIE fighter just bouncing up and down like it's a Bugs Bunny cartoon, and they're rolling around. The TIE fighter's cartoonily stretching up and down. When a plane crashes, it's a long, dreadful screaming arc, and then it hits something and it explodes. So that isn't what planes do. And Star Wars action is basically World War II dogfighting. Planes don't wibbly wobbly around herkily jerkily when they're careening and crashing. Just as the first TIE, so all this time we were talking about the second TIE apparently, and the second TIE became the TIE, and now that TIE's gone and it's the first TIE. First TIE's back. Just as the first TIE, now looping back on its return trip, begins firing its cannons. This is a sentence fragment. Just as the first TIE, now looping back on its return trip, begins firing its cannons. Sentence fragment. Now again, if you have a narrator, and the narrator makes sense, the narrator can speak in sentence fragments if the narrator is terrified. A tiger! Going to eat me, right? That makes sense because it's a tiger that's going to eat me. I don't pause and say that tiger, which I am currently looking at, is going to eat. But this doesn't make sense because we don't know who the narrator is. And actually, this isn't the moment for fractional thoughts. I just think this is a typo that got missed. It should be something like, just then, the first TIE loop back. So anything that isn't a sentence fragment here, basically. The blasts pepper the top of the building, crossing the rooftop and coming right for them. Temmin turns and looks. There's no time to think, only time to act. But there's no other roof to which they can jump. Singer points at what? A third TIE has joined the fray. It swoops in, front blasters flashing, lasers unzipping the sky. So the sky's a Ziploc bags. That's what the lasers do. Lasers ripping through the sky, hot blasts of air flashing in your face. There have to be some. There have to be some feeling or sensory pictures like touch, taste, and smell. The lasers create a smoky smell that fills your nostrils. There has to be some colorful language to evoke the idea of these lasers ripping through the atmosphere that convey the excitement better than lasers unzipping the sky. Lasers that strike the first TIE in the side. Oh. So I get so we're already reeling from the lasers unzipping the sky, and now it's a new thing. So what's supposed to be the surprise is that the lasers don't hit them, but hit the first TIE fighter. But we barely processed the first TIE fighter and the third TIE fighter, and the lasers from the third TIE fighter before, boom, lasers that strike the first TIE in the side. The lasers aren't what's important. It's the characters that are important. They see the third TIE fighter coming at them. We're dead, thinks the narrator. And then they see the blast of light as the lasers fire, cut off, straight into the enemy TIE fighter. Boom. And go ahead and use some sound effects, because the surprise here is that the third TIE fighter is not shooting at them. It looks like it's going to shoot at them, but it's shooting at the first. I sort of see, what's frustrating is I sort of see Chuck Wendig's intention. I see the TV show that Chuck Wendig has in his imagination, but he's such an arrogant son of a bitch who thinks he's so great. And he's so much better than all those old dead white men who are so racist that he hasn't read. He hasn't read enough to know what he's doing, and just look at it. Look for the ridiculous thing. Fight the text and see if you can find what's ridiculous in it to save it. Lasers that strike the first tie in the side. Its hexagonal wing panel breaks off, hitting the side of the comm station. The rest of it spins off to the side, streaking along. Oh, man. So I just hope that Chuck Wendig is the only author in history who has all of his works pirated forever. I hope all of human history will continue to pirate Chuck Wendig's works, and he doesn't get a penny for it, for what he did to archive.org. All right, so I want to add a caveat to this. The caveat is, at least Chuck Wendig wrote a Star Wars book. So as much as I make fun of him, and as painful as it is that this is something with the stamp of Disney approval on it, there's some people who think that this is canon and care. Why would you care that this is canon? Why would you suffer through this? This isn't Star Wars. Just because there's the word Star Wars is on the title and someone has a lightsaber on the title, that doesn't make it Star Wars. Whatever this is not Star Wars. This is some new mail thing. This is the writing of a Twitter socialist activist who, through some act of nepotism or cultural decadence, has managed to score a Star Wars deal. And as I'm making fun of it, the caveat is, at least he wrote something off, even if it's awful. At least he wrote something. So the stick to you should be, you should write something. If you read this and you hear in your head, how the hell is he getting this published? What's wrong with Disney publication? He's getting this, but well, then you need to write something. And maybe you won't write Star Wars. Maybe you can't write Star Wars because you don't have the right connections. But if you hear what's wrong with this, I challenge you to write whatever goofy story you've had percolating in your head that's your response to Star Wars, and just get that out there. Even if you can't get it to a publisher, just get it out there and sell PDFs of it for $1, because I see cultural decline and the destruction of Western civilization on this page. And if you sense something bad in a story, you have a moral responsibility to put something good in the world. Star Wars is no longer Star Wars. That means that Star Wars, what made original Star Wars magic, has gone somewhere else. And maybe it's in your imagination, or maybe a tiny little piece of it is in your imagination. Whatever made Steve Ditko's Stan Lee Spider-Man special isn't in New Spider-Man. The magic imagination of Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, that's been inherited by someone else, and they're probably making indie comics in relative obscurity. So if you appreciate the arts, you also have a moral responsibility to throw this kind of stuff. We're going to do this right now. We're going to throw this directly in the trash. I'm going to right-click it and empty the trash. That's what you do with New Star Wars. And you go find the creative person like Timothy Lim and POTUS Thump on Indiegogo. Let's go find it. No, it's on Kickstarter. But anyway, you get the idea. Go support Timothy Lim and Mark Pellegrini on Indiegogo. It's Black Ops. It's great. I love it. I'll have a review coming soon. Love you guys. Catch you later.